you don't need to be told that towns and villages are under massive pressure, facing the challenge of depopulation, but also online trading. And for those that don't understand that challenge, I would encourage people to listen back to the recent drive time reports by John Cook, who gave views from the ground. I want to discuss with you how the two schemes, the Town and Village scheme and the scheme to encourage people to live back the 6 pilot towns, are progressing, and what your key priorities in this area are for 2019.
Minister, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. The Town and Village Renewal Scheme forms an important part for the Action Plan for Rural Development and has the potential to stimulate economic recovery and job creation in towns and villages across rural Ireland. The scheme is specifically focused on rural towns and villages with a population of less than 10,000 people. The Town and Village Renewal Scheme was introduced in the second half of 2016, and to date almost 53 million has been approved for more than 670 projects across the country. These projects cover a range of activities, from improving the public realm to making towns and villages more attractive for locals and visitors alike, to job creation initiatives such as the development of enterprise hubs and digital hubs. Details of the 29 Town and Village Renewal Scheme are currently being finalised by my officials. I anticipate that the scheme will be announced during the first quarter of this year, with approvals being announced in the second half of the year, as was the case in the previous year. The scheme to encourage residential occupancy in rural towns and villages is underway. I launched the initiative last October and announced that 6 rural towns which had been invited to participate in the initial pilot scheme. The scheme is being led locally by the local authorities in close collaboration with all relevant stakeholders. And with my department, up to 100,000 is being made available in respect of each participating town. This funding will be used by the local authorities to engage with communities and local businesses and identify practical solutions to increase the number of people living in our rural towns. I expect to receive a report from each of the local authorities in the first half of this year on the progress which they have made. It is envisaged that the solutions identified through the 6 pilot towns will lead to the development of more proposals for funding from the Rural Regeneration Development Fund in due course.
Minister, in relation to the Town and Village scheme, you said there's 53 million approved. Can you confirm to the House how much that has been drawn down? And secondly, there was a £2.5 million underspend in that programme in 2018 from PQs that we got back from your department. Can you confirm, was that money spent since, and was all of the money allocated in 2018 spent? And in relation to both schemes, you and I see it on a daily basis, and I think there's huge potential in our towns and villages. And there's no sense in you ploughing away in your department doing this if other departments are ignorant or not cooperating with your department. So, for instance, Department of Local Government, there should be rates remissions for people who are trying to invest in their properties. Instead, what happens? If you invest in a business property in a small town village, you get a bigger rates bill. There's a huge amount of space, overhead, many properties in towns and villages that will be ideal for assisted accommodation for older people who want to live near services. Department of Local Government, again, and Housing should be engaging with you around a scheme for social and affordable housing within those existing properties, getting people back into services. And finally, you see the Department of Health dragging their feet around a GP contract. A GP service is essential to any local community. That too will keep people and encourage people to move back into rural areas. So these schemes should be bigger, but what else is going on around the government table to get services into local communities?
Ministers, 1 minute.
Thank you, Deputy. What has been drawn down to date at 13,854,000. But to be fair to the local authorities, these schemes had always intended to be run over a 15-month period. To be fair, we allocated the funding in October, and we expect it to be spent this year. And it's kind of a roll-on scheme, and it's a scheme whenever whoever takes over this job in the future, that's the way it has to be, because local authorities are not actually able to deliver the year, so they need a bit of time, they need to get their Part 8 in place, and there's other work that they need to do. But now, the local authorities haven't had themselves in glory around the country in relation to this programme and every other programme I've had, and I will be asking my officials over the next number of days to write to the local authorities in relation to all the funding I've allocated under the TLAR programme, under the outdoor recreation, rural recreation, and I want to be looking for a 4-monthly report from the local authority to see what they're delivering. But in relation to the town and village scheme, it has been a very good scheme, and you know that yourself in relation to take, like, even just take a town of Ballycastle, the 200,000 that we allocated for the community centre there and the Ballyglen Art Centre, and that's with the local developer that developed the street, with the KG Fields where they're getting 1.5 million, and also the signature point that's there in Ballycastle, and the funding for the GA. And it's not all about funding, but what it has done for that town, and it's a town we should use as an example, it has actually given us a lift. And it has given that town, and that has happened all over the country. The same thing above in Drumshambo. You know, we get some funding there for the walk scheme.
Well expired.
Sorry.
Deputy Calleary.
I agree with you, Minister, around Ballycastle, but that's community-led. It's certainly not local authority-led. And if you're waiting for the local authorities to lead this, like 13 out of 53 million drawn down, and you do need to start kicking heads. Local authorities are great at showing up for openings, but if you really need across all your departments, there's no sense in you allocating money if it's not being drawn down and not being spent in the communities where it's needed. It's badly needed. And I really encourage you to get that information and to publish it, because it's time that you started calling out publicly local authorities who are letting their communities down by not spending this money. And it's across a lot of your programmes. There are substantial under allocations not drawn down. Local authorities need to be told, officials and members, they're letting their communities down by not drawing this money down. And I think you need to do more than write to them. We need to name and shame those poor performers.
Can I get a final response, Minister?
Well, thank you. I want to thank the Deputy, and I really mean this, and I thank you for your support, because you're actually right. I've been saying this within the department, and of course, civil servants don't like to give out to civil servants, and they'll protect one another whenever they have to. But the local authorities have not held themselves in glory. And what annoys me, every single week, I take the cuttings out of the local papers from all over the country, and I see Fine Gael councillors, I see Fianna Fáil councillors, independent councillors criticising government for not providing funding. There was never as much funding put into rural Ireland. The Leader programme, there's 22 million, and the town and village 53 million, outdoor recreation 41 million, the TLAR programme 25 million, local improvement scheme 38 million, sidecap programme 190 million. And it's not that the funding is not going in. Sometimes the local authorities are not doing what they should do, and I will be asking them in the next round of these schemes, they're not to be making application for schemes if they're not ready to deliver them. And that's a message that will go out loud and clear. And I think you're right. It may be a time that I started, putting out figures and showing what the local authorities have got from my department. And I actually have a list here for every county, how much money they got from my department last year. But the only list I don't have of the opposite issue is how much they actually have spent, and that's something I need to start working on. In relation to the pilot scheme that you talked about earlier, you're quite correct. When the report comes back from the 6 towns, I want to sit down with all departments. And what I don't want to see happening, and you actually touched on it there, I don't want to see every other department throwing schemes over to the Rural Regeneration Scheme or over to my department. I see it happening now on a regular basis from ministers. When letters come in from TDs or come in from community groups, they want to say, well, they say, we don't want to touch that. That's a matter for my department. It's not. We need to sit down, we need to start working out, and we will do that when we get this pilot scheme results back.
Deputy Martin Kenny has 30 seconds.